Coming live from the Tivoli Met Radio studio here on Auraria campus, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for listening to All Sports through Met Radio on mymetmedia.com, live every Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. This is your host Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, college football, and golf. So before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. Since the All Sports with Gerardo show had its 1-year anniversary this month, if you haven't, make sure to check out All Sports with Gerardo on the new mymetmedia.com website. Subscribe to my YouTube page. Follow All Sports on social media at All Sports with Gerardo on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All Sports with Gerardo has a YouTube page, a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a Twitter page. To start off with Major League Baseball, the Major League Baseball Players Weekend was last weekend from August 23rd to August 25th. What I like about the Major League Baseball Players Weekend is the type of jerseys the players get to wear, whether they're the home team or the visiting team. This year, all the home teams were wearing all white jerseys, and all the visiting teams were wearing all black jerseys. Now, if you watched any of the games this past weekend, you may have noticed that the pitcher, especially for the home team, since they were wearing all white jerseys, was wearing the hat color of the team. For example, the Rockies were in St. Louis going against the Cardinals. So the Cardinals pitchers were wearing their red St. Louis Cardinals hats. Now the reason they were doing that was because since the baseball is white, they didn't want the baseball to blend into the pitcher's uniform or into the hat, since they were wearing all white. So that's the reason why the pitchers were wearing their colored hat. But overall, the Major League Baseball Players Weekend, it's always a great weekend. It's always towards the end of August every season. They've been doing it for the last 3 seasons. This season, I really like the jerseys that they were wearing, the home team and the visiting team. I also like the jerseys the players got to wear last season. Another thing I like about the Major League Baseball Players Weekend is the nicknames that these players have, or different names that they go by. Also, some players honor individual people or places as their name on the back of the jersey. So it's interesting to see some of the nicknames or some of the names that individual players honor during the Major League Baseball Players Weekend. Pete Alonso broke the single-season Mets record for home runs with 42 home runs this season. Aaron Judge is the 3rd fastest player to reach 100 home runs in Major League Baseball history. Ronald Acuna Jr. joins Mike Trout as the only 2 players to record a 30 home run and a 30 stolen base season under the age of 22. This season, the Rockies haven't been playing the way that we've expected. And looking at the last few weeks of Rockies baseball, they're not going to have a chance of making it into the postseason this year. So the Rockies are going to have to turn the page once the 2019 season comes to an end towards the end of September and move on to the 2020 season and figure out how can they improve the 2019 team going into 2020 and get the Rockies back into the postseason in 2020. Now there's many factors as to why the Rockies have not been playing great this season and why they don't have a great record. But if you look at the list of all the injured Rockies players, this could be another reason as to why the Rockies haven't been having a great season this year. So here's a list of all the Rockies players that are currently injured. This includes Brendan Rodgers. He had right shoulder surgery. He is out for the rest of the season. Tyler Anderson, he had left knee surgery. He is out for the rest of the season. Chad Bettis, right hip impingement. He is out for the rest of the season. John Gray, he fractured his left foot. He is out for the rest of the season. David Dahl, he suffered a high right ankle sprain. He is currently on the 10-day injured list, so we're going to have to wait and see when David Dahl returns back to the field. Scott Oberg, with a blood clot, he was placed on the 60-day injured list. He's likely going to miss the rest of the season since there's just about a month left of regular season baseball. Kyle Freeland, with a left groin strain, he was placed on the 10-day injured list. We're going to have to wait and see when he returns. German Marquez, he has a right arm infraction. He was placed on the 10-day injured list. We're going to have to wait and see when he returns. And Raimel Tapia, he has a left hand contusion. He was placed on the 10-day injured list, and we're going to have to wait and see when he returns back to the field. So overall this season, it hasn't been looking that great for the Rockies. Now the Rockies have definitely took a big hit among starting pitchers. They've been without Tyler Anderson for most of the season. They lost Chad Bettis, John Gray, and Scott Oberg for the rest of the season. So that hasn't been great for the Rockies, especially on the pitching side. Now Brendan Rodgers and Tyler Anderson have been on the injured list for a while. Chad Bettis, John Gray were just added recently. David Dahl's been on a few weeks already. Scott Oberg, Kyle Freeland, German Marquez, and Raimel Tapia were just added in the last few days, in the last few weeks. So the Rockies have definitely took a lot of big hits, especially among injured players. Now some of these players are some of their best players on the team, whether they're pitchers or they're hitters. So losing most of these players due to injury for the rest of the season or just for a few weeks, this has definitely been a big loss for the Rockies. So that could be another reason as to why the Rockies haven't been playing that great of baseball this season. So if all these injured players, it's taken a big hit among the pitching, starting pitchers, relievers in the bullpen. So for the last few weeks, the last few days, and for the next few weeks until the end of the regular season, among pitchers and hitters, you're going to see a lot of call-ups from Albuquerque. The Rockies are going to call up a lot of prospects from AAA down in Albuquerque. These last few weeks, you've seen some new faces coming up and down. In the last few days, we've had new faces. And in the next few weeks, I would expect a few new faces. So now that the Rockies roster and the rest of the team rosters are going to expand up to a 40-man roster, you're going to see all these teams calling up new prospects, and you're going to see a lot of new faces on the Rockies and on the rest of the Major League Baseball teams for the rest of the season. Nolan Arenado is the first third baseman to reach 30-plus home runs and 100-plus RBIs in 5 consecutive seasons. So right now I'm going to update you with the current Rockies schedule from this past week, and I'm also going to tell you who the Rockies go against in the next week. So to start off, this past weekend, the Rockies continued their road trip up to St. Louis, and they had a 4-game series against the Cardinals. In the first game, the Rockies lost a close game 5-6. In the second game, the Rockies lost the game 3-8. In the third game, the Rockies lost the game 0-6. And in the fourth game, the Rockies lost the game 4-11. So overall, the Rockies didn't play that great against the Cardinals up in St. Louis. The only game they really had a chance at winning was the first game of the series. The rest of the games, the Rockies just got blown out, and the Cardinals were able to sweep the Rockies in a 4-game series. This past week, the Rockies returned back to Coors Field to start a 7-game homestand here in Denver at Coors Field. On Monday, August 26th, the Rockies had a makeup game against the Braves here at Coors Field. This was the last game of the Rockies-Braves series from back in April, but since the last game of the series back in April was postponed due to weather, they had to make up the game on Monday, August 26th. The Rockies were able to win in walk-off style in the bottom of the 9th inning by a Ryan McMahon 2-run walk-off home run, and the Rockies were able to win this game against the Braves 3-1. This past week, the Rockies continued their homestand, and they had an interleague matchup against the Boston Red Sox here at Coors Field, which was a 2-game series. In the first game, the Rockies lost the game 6-10, and in the second game, the Rockies lost the game 4-7. So overall, the Red Sox were able to take this series from the Rockies and win these 2 games here at Coors Field. Now to finish off August, the Rockies continue their homestand here at Coors Field. And this weekend, the Rockies go against the Pirates in a 4-game series here at Coors Field to finish off August. Then going into September, which is the last month of regular season baseball, the Rockies start their road trip, and in the first week of September, the Rockies head down to Los Angeles to go against their divisional rival, the Dodgers, at Dodger Stadium down in Los Angeles. So that's the current Rockies schedule of the final scores and the teams the Rockies went against this past week and who the Rockies go against this week. So right now, I'm going to update you with the current Major League Baseball standings in the American and National League. To start off in the American League East, right now the Yankees are leading this division at 88 games, and the next closest team is the Rays by 11.5 games, and they're currently sitting at 76 games. In the American League Central, right now the Twins are leading this division at 81 games, and the next closest team is the Indians by 3 games, and they're sitting at 79 games. In the American League West, right now the Astros are leading this division at 87 games, and the next closest team is the Athletics by 9.5 games, and they're currently sitting at 77 games. In the National League East, right now the Braves are leading this division at 81 games, and the next closest team is the Nationals by 5.5 games, and they're currently sitting at 74 games. In the National League Central, right now the Cardinals are leading this division at 73 games, and the next closest team is the Cubs by 2 games, and they're sitting at 71 games. In the National League West, right now the Dodgers are leading this division at 88 games, and the other 4 teams in the National League West ain't going to catch up to the Dodgers. The next closest team is the Diamondbacks, and they're sitting at 67 games, and they're 20 games back from the Dodgers. So looking at the current Major League Baseball standings in the American and National League, the divisions you want to keep an eye on is the American League Central. This is becoming a tight race between the Twins and the Indians. And the Indians are only 3 games back from the Twins. And in the National League Central, the Cardinals are currently leading this division, but the Cubs, they're only 2 games back. And you still want to keep an eye out for the Brewers, even though they're 5.5 games back. So, the American League Central and the National League Central are the 2 divisions you want to keep an eye out for going into the end of August and going into September. So that's the current Major League Baseball standings in the American and National League. In the Major League Baseball power rankings, the current top 10 Major League Baseball teams are the Dodgers, Astros, Yankees, Braves, Twins, Athletics, Rays, Cardinals, Cubs, and Nationals. These top 10 teams in Major League Baseball right now, these are the 10 teams you definitely want to keep an eye out for going into the end of August and going into September. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NFL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NFL football. So here's the big story that happened this past weekend in the NFL. This was such a huge surprise to the NFL and to all of sports this past weekend. So this past weekend, Colts quarterback Andrew Luck informed the Colts he's retiring at the age of 29 after playing 7 seasons in the NFL. Andrew Luck was the first overall pick in the 2012 NFL Draft. He threw 171 touchdowns. He had 23,671 yards. He is a 4-time Pro Bowler. He had a career record of 53-33, and he was the 2018 NFL AP Comeback Player of the Year. With the announcement from Andrew Luck that he was retiring from the NFL, this was such a huge surprise to the NFL and to all of sports. The Colts and the rest of the NFL couldn't believe that Andrew Luck was retiring. So Andrew Luck stated why he's retiring from the NFL. For the last 4 years or so, I've been in this cycle of injury, pain rehab. I felt stuck in it. The only way I see out is to no longer play football. I haven't been able to live the life I want to live. It's taken my joy of this game away. The only way forward for me is to remove myself from football. This isn't an easy decision, honestly. It's the hardest decision of my life, but it's the right decision for me. So the Colts had their preseason game this past weekend, and during the game, the news leaked that Andrew Luck was retiring from the NFL, and he was going to inform the Colts the following day, which would have been this past weekend, and have a press conference stating that he was retiring from the NFL. But the Colts had their 3rd preseason game this past weekend, which would have been on Saturday. And during the game, this news got leaked out on the internet and on social media that Andrew Luck was retiring. Now everybody in attendance at Lucas Oil Stadium, which is the home of the Colts in Indianapolis, Indiana, was shocked and surprised to see that Andrew Luck was retiring. the Colts fans and the rest of the NFL couldn't believe Andrew Luck was retiring from the NFL. I don't know how this news got leaked out during the game on Saturday, but the Colts fans and the rest of the NFL was surprised. Now, the announcement of Andrew Luck announcing and stating that he was retiring from the NFL wasn't supposed to happen until the following day, which would have been on Sunday. And during the afternoon, Andrew Luck was going to have a press conference stating that he was going to retire from the NFL, but somehow this information got leaked during the Colts preseason game on Saturday. Now, what was really surprising and what was really sad was after the Colts fans in attendance found out that Andrew Luck was retiring, when the game ended and Andrew Luck was walking off the field, all the Colts fans were booing Andrew Luck, which was really surprising. Now, after all the Colts players had their press conferences after the game, Andrew Luck came to the podium, and since this information got leaked during the game that he was retiring from the NFL, Andrew Luck just had his press conference at that moment and announced that he was retiring from the NFL, and he stated why he was retiring from the NFL. During this press conference, Andrew Luck was very emotional, and if you listened or saw the press conference, you could tell this was hard for Andrew Luck to announce this decision of retiring from the NFL, and he was also very emotional while speaking during this press conference. But the next day, Andrew Luck and the Colts had an official press conference where he stated he was retiring from the NFL. Now, for Andrew Luck, he isn't the first player in the NFL to announce he is retiring at a really young age, when he's only in his late 20s and he's playing in his prime years. Andrew Luck, Rob Gronkowski, Calvin Johnson, and Barry Sanders are the four NFL superstars to retire during their prime years in the NFL. In the last few months, after last season ended and the Patriots won Super Bowl 53, Rob Gronkowski retired from the NFL at a young age. He was still in his prime years. Calvin Johnson also had to retire at a young age. He was in his prime years. Barry Sanders had to retire at a young age from the NFL. And there's also been some other players that have had to retire during their prime years. Now, it's sad to see Andrew Luck leave the NFL. It was sad to see Rob Gronkowski, Calvin Johnson, Barry Sanders, and other players leave from the NFL at a young age during their prime years. There's no doubt that Andrew Luck, Rob Gronkowski, Calvin Johnson, and Barry Sanders were NFL superstars, and they were some of the best players in their position to ever play in the NFL. It was sad to see these four players and other players have to retire from the NFL at a young age due to all the injuries they've suffered throughout their NFL career. Andrew Luck, Rob Gronkowski, and Calvin Johnson had to retire at a young age, but that was due to the amount of injuries and the type of injuries they were suffering during their NFL career. Now, we're going to have to wait and see what Andrew Luck's plans are going into the future. We're also going to have to wait and see what Rob Gronkowski's plans are going into the future. You never know Andrew Luck or Rob Gronkowski could return back to the NFL in the next few years and continue their career and play another few years in the NFL, since Andrew Luck and Rob Gronkowski were some of the best players to ever play in the NFL. And they're still young, but they're also still in their prime years. So we're going to have to wait and see if Andrew Luck or Rob Gronkowski ever returns back to the NFL in the next few years. But you never know. But I could see one of these two players returning back to the NFL in the next few years. Even though Andrew Luck, Rob Gronkowski, Calvin Johnson, and Barry Sanders were NFL superstars, their careers were in the making. It was only the beginning of their careers. They were definitely NFL superstars and some of the best players to ever play in the NFL. Now, if Andrew Luck and Rob Gronkowski never return back to the football field and play in the NFL again, the NFL is definitely going to miss Andrew Luck and Rob Gronkowski. And there's no doubt that Andrew Luck and Rob Gronkowski were two of the best players to ever play in the NFL. Now, looking at the quarterback situation for the Colts, the current quarterbacks on the Colts roster include Jacoby Brissett, Philip Walker, and now Chad Kelly. Looking at these three quarterbacks are definitely backup quarterbacks, but I don't really see these quarterbacks as being starters or being quarterbacks that can carry a team, win many games during the regular season, and take this team into the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. So the Colts are now considering looking at all of the quarterback options and trying to go out there and see what other quarterbacks they could bring onto the roster so the Colts can have a starting quarterback that is a decent quarterback in the NFL, that plays good, and that can win many games for the Colts this season and going into the future, and possibly take the Colts into the playoffs this year. Now, for the last year or two, the Colts kind of thought that this Andrew Luck situation would turn into retirement, just like it did this past week. This past offseason, during the NFL draft, and even last year, the Colts were considering drafting a quarterback, but they still believed in Andrew Luck, so they didn't want to draft a quarterback. And the Colts believed that Andrew Luck was going to be their franchise quarterback for the next few years going into the future, but unfortunately that's not going to happen. We're going to have to wait and see what the Colts do at the quarterback position these next few weeks. Now, if there's not that many great options out there, this offseason, the Colts will consider drafting a quarterback, or the Colts are going to have to pursue a quarterback during free agency. So we're going to have to wait and see what the Colts do in the next few weeks and going into this offseason at the quarterback position. The Redskins announced Case Keenum will be their starting quarterback for the beginning of the regular season. Kicker Steven Haskika and the Bills have agreed to a 2-year contract. The Packers traded linebacker Reggie Gilbert to the Titans for a 7th-round pick. The Jets traded a 2020 6th-round pick to the Colts for cornerback Nate Hairston. The Packers released safety Josh Jones. The Raiders released running back Doug Martin. Texans running back Lamar Miller is out for this whole season after tearing his ACL during the preseason. Titans offensive tackle Taylor Lewan is now officially suspended 4 games for violating the NFL's performance-enhancing drug policy. Broncos quarterback Drew Lock could be placed on injured reserve and miss part of the regular season. The Broncos released defensive lineman Zach Kerr and linebacker Dakota Watson. The Broncos lost to the Rams 6-10 in their 3rd preseason game on Saturday, August 24th in Los Angeles. This is the final week of preseason football, and after this final week of preseason football ends, since this is the final week, most teams across the NFL will not be playing their starters in their final preseason game. They're looking to see what players are going to make their 53-man roster. So they're looking at the backup players, and they're looking at the players that are on the borderline of making the team or being cut from the team. So after the final week of preseason football, going into this weekend and going into next week, all 32 teams across the NFL will conduct their 53-man roster. And next week, which is the week before the 100th season of NFL football begins and the regular season begins, all 32 teams across the NFL will announce their 53-man rosters. So we're going to have to wait and see what all 32 teams do and what players are on the 53-man roster for all 32 teams across the NFL. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what players make the 53-man roster for the Broncos and for the rest of the NFL, but also what players get cut from the Broncos and the rest of the NFL teams across the NFL this weekend and going into next week before the regular season begins. The Broncos' final preseason game is against the Cardinals here in Denver at Mile High Stadium on Thursday, August 29th. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NBA. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NBA basketball. This season, the Spurs are going to retire Tony Parker's number 9 jersey on November 11. Tony Parker was selected 28th by the Spurs in the 2001 NBA draft. He was a 6-time All-Star, and he was the Finals MVP in 2007. Tony Parker played most of his career for the Spurs, except for his last season in the NBA, since he played for the Hornets. For the Spurs, Tony Parker, he started 1,151 regular season games, and he averaged 15.5 points and 5.5 assists per game for the Spurs. He also played in 226 playoff games, averaging close to 18 points and 5 assists per game for the Spurs. Now, Tony Parker, he was a part of the Spurs' Big Three for almost the last 2 decades. Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, and Manu Ginobili, they were the Spurs' Big Three for almost 2 decades. During that time period, they won 5 NBA championships for the Spurs. These Spurs teams, for almost 2 decades, they were the best teams the Spurs have ever had. And they were also the best teams in the NBA during that time period. So there's no doubt that Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, and Manu Ginobili were three of the best players to ever play for the Spurs. And the Spurs rosters, for all those years, for almost 2 decades during that time period, the Spurs were also one of the best teams in the NBA during that time period. Tim Duncan's number 21 jersey was retired in 2016. Manu Ginobili's number 20 jersey was retired last season. And this season, Tony Parker's number 9 jersey will be retired. After clearing waivers, Dwight Howard signed a contract with the Lakers. In the last few weeks, after DeMarcus Cousins signed a 1-year contract with the Lakers, but he also tore his ACL, the Lakers had to explore other options since DeMarcus Cousins is going to be out for the entire season. The Lakers needed another big man to play center or power forward for the Lakers. So the Lakers explored all the options out there that were available, and the Lakers decided bringing Dwight Howard to replace DeMarcus Cousins. And since Dwight Howard played for the Lakers a few years ago, Dwight Howard was also a great option for the Lakers, since the Lakers could bring back Dwight Howard. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about college football, golf, and the end of the show. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to college football. Alabama star linebacker Dylan Moses tore his ACL during practice this past week, and he will miss the entire 2019 season. This is a huge loss for Alabama, especially before the 2019 college football season begins. Dylan Moses was supposed to be their best linebacker, and he was also supposed to be one of their best players on defense. Also, linebacker Dylan Moses was supposed to be one of the top prospects going into the 2020 NFL draft, and Dylan Moses was supposed to be a first-round pick. So we're going to have to wait and see if linebacker Dylan Moses returns back to Alabama next year, or is Dylan Moses going to still pursue the NFL and enter the 2020 NFL draft? But linebacker Dylan Moses is definitely a huge loss for Alabama. This is the first week of college football. So looking at the Week 1 college football schedule, these are the games you want to keep an eye on. Last weekend, the University of Miami went against number 8 Florida. This was the first game of the 2019 college football season. This was such a great game. This was also a close game. Number 8 Florida was able to win a close game, 24-20. So the first game of the 2019 college football season, it was definitely a great game. This is also a great rivalry between Florida and the University of Miami. So this was a great game if you didn't get to watch the game. But looking at all the matchups going into the first week of college football, there's not really a whole lot of big games. And all the teams that are ranked, they don't play against teams that are ranked. So there's really not any big matchups against ranked teams, except for number 11 Oregon is going against number 16 Auburn. That's really the only game you want to keep an eye on going into the first week of college football. Otherwise, the rest of the games, they're just matchups, and all the ranked teams just go against other teams that are not ranked. But I'm glad and excited that this is the first week of college football, and the 2019 college football season begins this weekend. Friday, August 30th is the final Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. So if you get the opportunity to start off your Labor Day weekend, I would highly recommend that you go down to Mile High Stadium and check out the final Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. This is the final Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU at Mile High Stadium. The Rocky Mountain Showdown is going to go away for the next few years. In a few years from now, the Rocky Mountain Showdown will return, but it will no longer be played at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. The Rocky Mountain Showdown will be played up at CU Boulder and at CSU. The Rocky Mountain Showdown will alternate between the CU Boulder campus and the CSU Fort Collins campus every year. So one year, the Rocky Mountain Showdown will be at CU Boulder. Then the next year, it'll be at CSU Fort Collins. So every year, once the Rocky Mountain Showdown returns, it will be played at CU or CSU. And it's just going to alternate between the two campuses every year. Moving on now to golf, Rory McIlroy is this year's FedEx Cup champion at the Tour Championship. Moving on now to end the show, what to watch for this week in sports. The Broncos' final preseason game is against the Cardinals here in Denver at Mile High Stadium on Thursday, August 29th. This is the final week of NFL preseason football. This is the first week of college football. Friday, August 30th is the final Rocky Mountain Showdown between CU and CSU at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. CU Buffaloes, CSU Rams, Major League Baseball. Moving on now on the next show, I will talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, and NBA basketball. I hope you all have a great Labor Day weekend. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports through Met Radio here on mymetmedia.com. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.